So yeah, just excited to chat with Dr. Beverly Yates. We're going to be talking about insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes. And so let's go ahead and go. I'm going to dive into Dr. Beverly's bio. So Dr. Beverly Yates is a licensed doctor of naturopathic medicine. She is the nation's leader in online type 2 diabetes care. Her virtual practice has programs and supplements to help people lower their blood sugar naturally at home without ever having to step foot in a clinic. And so Dr. Yates is on a mission to, as she just mentioned, help 3 million people heal from type 2 diabetes and prediabetes. She used her background in MIT electrical engineering and work as a systems engineer in Silicon Valley to create effective online programs for people with diabetes to achieve blood sugar control and live the life they love. And so Dr. Beverly is also an internationally recognized speaker and expert in diabetes and heart disease. She is published author of Heart Health for Black Women, A Natural Approach to Healing and Preventing Heart Disease, and co-author of multiple books, including with Jack Canfield, The Soul of Success, Volume 2. And Dr. Yates is writing a new book on type 2 diabetes and prediabetes based on her Yates protocol, focusing on 5 practical, enjoyable steps for reversing type 2 and prediabetes and living the life you love. And last but not least, Dr. Yates has been featured in numerous media outlets, including ABC, CBS, NBC, PBS, NPR, Black News Channel, Fox, SiriusXM, Mind, Body, Green, Essence Magazine, Good Housekeeping, Women's World, Reader's Digest, Rodale Press, and more. And again, thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Beverly.
You're very welcome. I'm looking forward to our conversation. I hope people listening can get some benefit from it and some clarity. As you well know, there's all sorts of information that's available, but some of it's not good information. And I think it's challenging for people who aren't health professionals to really be able to tell what's actual, what's helpful versus things they probably ought to steer clear of.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Well, before we dive into the topics, can you talk a little bit about your background? How did you start focusing on helping people with insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes?
Sure. So originally, my focus clinically when I first graduated from naturopathic medical school was on heart disease. I had had an amazing journey with one person who had severe congestive heart failure as during my clinical training, as we went through in residency internship process. And other folks I had worked with had problems with stress, with sleep disorders, with gut problems, skin, those things, often in the realm of what we would consider to be primary care. My shift to diabetes came for 2 reasons. One was something that became clear to me in the mid 2000s into the 2010s, this amazing shift of people coming into the clinic who had prediabetes, who had type 2 diabetes, who had insulin resistance or some kind of metabolic dysregulation. And I saw this big uptick that also matched, any of the graphs or data you could find from the CDC and other places. You saw this big shift coming into the 2000s of more and more people showing up with blood sugar problems. And it just, fueled my own growing sense of alarm because those are the kinds of metabolic problems that are deadly and that shorten lives and people have a low quality of life. And to me, part of the concern was A, this is a threat to humankind, but B, because it is so lifestyle sensitive, it's good news because you could do something about it. It's not something where we're helpless, but you have to know specifically what to do. Just poking around, Googling for tips is not going to get it done. You got to take care of it now. Sometimes people don't have that sense of urgency. They don't feel a fire lit under their butt because the ebbing tide of their health is a gradual, relentless shift. It isn't a big spike to misery. It is an ongoing cycle. And so they might not feel the same mortal threat someone feels when they have a disease like, say, cancer or some of the neurologic diseases that can be so devastating and are quickly obvious that they're devastating. This is gradual devastation, but nonetheless, it's devastation. The other, honestly, Dr. Eric, was my own realization as I reconnected to my family of origin on my father's side, my birth family. My parents divorced when I was about a year old, so I didn't really get to know my dad's family when I was growing up. As an adult, I, gathered up the courage. God bless my best friend. She was a great model for this, to go and reach for that relationship as an adult. And God bless my mother because she didn't interfere. In fact, she encouraged that connection. She was so brave to do it because I know she was upset with him. But she did it anyway because she thought it would be helpful to me. What a gift a mother can give a daughter. And in that, as I got to know them, I found out that my father was one of 13 siblings, and all 13 of them had some kind of diabetes. They had type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, they had prediabetes. I'd argue now, looking back, maybe type 1.5, the glycemic issues in that side of the family. I mean, you don't usually hear of 100% prevalence in one generation of a disease. It's just amazing. And I had seen the issues around unhealed, unrecognized, improperly treated blood sugar just devastate that side of the family. So that got my undivided attention. At that point, I was making the transition from being the electrical engineer to becoming a licensed doctor of naturopathic medicine. And so now I was becoming equipped with the tools to make sure my own health could stay healthy and hopefully, knock on wood, continue to do the things to stay out of trouble. Myself and a handful of other cousins in that generation on that side of the family don't have diabetes. But boy, oh boy, I tell you, what a wake up call. So that shifted my clinical work and focus. So two things: the change in the general population and the fact that it became personal for me.
And so you mentioned that a lot of people don't take it serious enough. So can you explain what are some of the consequences of unmanaged type 2 diabetes, or even unmanaged insulin resistance, which eventually
Yeah.
could and often leads to type 2 diabetes?
Yeah. So one of the things that can go on is that people may come to find that they have mild cognitive impairment, right? They may have problems with their memory and their ability to just stay organized and to live a normal adult life. This is what precedes the onset, typically, of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. There's a reason why Alzheimer's is often called type 3 diabetes, because of the threat to the brain in the face of a rising tide of unrelenting blood sugar. And I want to emphasize for people that often it's the folks who have prediabetes who will wind up with dementia or Alzheimer's. You don't necessarily have to have gone all the way from pre-diabetes to type 2 diabetes. Sometimes people think, oh, well, only if you're a type 2 diabetic and have the highest A1C are you at risk for brain health. No, no, no. And this is what I'm telling people. I watched this happen in my own family, on my husband's family with my mother-in-law. And in looking back, because at the time when this first started, I was an engineer. I just didn't know. Knowing what I know now, I wish I'd known it then so that we could have helped her and helped her quickly before this became a problem. So anyone who's sitting there feeling a little smug, thinking, oh, I'm a pre-diabetic, right? A1C range of 5.7 to 6.4. I'm okay. No, you're not. Please do take it seriously. And just to define what's type 2 diabetes, that's an A1C, a blood test is measured as such, of 6.5 and higher.
And pre-diabetes, is that synonymous with insulin? Do you consider it synonymous with insulin resistance?
I think for most people, most of the time, yes, it is quite possible to have insulin resistance and not have an A1C above 5.7. And so I think it depends on the factors of your life. There's no such thing as one size fits all. That old 1950s advice of eat less and move more in today's busy, complex, stressed out world is just inadequate. There's plenty of people who are eating less and moving more, and they aren't able to get into and stay in a healthy blood sugar range. Instead, they just have this ongoing problem, right? So I think when it comes to insulin resistance, it's a warning sign. And it also should be a motivation to stay in a healthy range, eat healthy foods that are great for your body. They don't cause you to have a big food coma or energy crash, right? They don't cause gas and bloating. You can just eat and have normal digestion and even energy. I think one of the things that might be misunderstood around insulin resistance is that it can precede other serious things, but you can do things that are helpful to keep it from becoming a problem. So if you have consistent, regular exercise, that's always helpful. People ask, what's the best exercise? And I'm like, it's the one you'll do. That's the best exercise. Prescribing people exercise they hate doesn't work, right? It doesn't make sense. You like to dance, whatever qualifies for movement that you can do. Eating foods that you know are healthy for you and not causing blood sugar spikes and crashes, because that's important. If you have the blood sugar roller coaster, if you had a lot of ups and downs, that is hard. It's hard on your brain. It's hard on your moods. You become more irritable, or maybe you're hangry. It's hard on your entire body and psyche. You want that even flow for your blood sugar measurements. And it's great if you can either get a glucometer and test strips and test your blood sugar so you know what's going on. I think that should be in everyone's home health kit. If you find that it's too painful to stick your finger and get the necessary drop of blood, if you're in the US, you could always get a prescription written. If you're other parts of the world, it's over the counter. You can get a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, and wear it for a few weeks, just to see where you're at, what's going on. You might find that some things you think of as being unhealthy for you might be fine from the point of view of your blood sugar. And I'll bet you there's 2 or 3 things that you do that you think are healthy for your blood sugar that are not. You'll see these massive spikes and it just stays up for hours. That's your clue. That's not good. That's a problem.
So I'm guessing if someone has not just type 2 diabetes, but pre-diabetes, you recommend a continuous glucose monitor. But
Yes.
is there a time prior to that? Like if someone's hemoglobin A1C is on the higher side, let's say like 5.5, 5.6, like is there a threshold where you recommend that that's a good idea to get the continuous glucose monitor?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. There's a transitional phase, right? I think when an A1C shows a steady climbing pattern, like say you've been checked over the course of the last 2 years every 6 months, right? So now we have 4 data points, and maybe your A1C started out at like 5.0. Then the next time you're checked, it's at 5.3. Next time you're checked, it's 5.5. Next time you're checked, it's 5.6. Clearly an upward trend. Yeah, I think it would be a great idea to have a continuous glucose monitor or use an old school glucometer and test strips just to see what your blood sugar reactions are to the foods that you eat and beverages that you drink so that you really know how you're doing. I think that to me, the CGM wins because then you can get that health data from overnight while you're asleep. You're not going to typically wake up in the middle of the night to do finger sticks unless you already have the problem. And I do know people who have type 2 diabetes who do finger sticks if they wake up at like 3 or 4 a.m. as a way to check and test. But I think there's a lot to be said for having a great night's sleep and having continuous data.
Agreed. And you talk about hemoglobin A1C. What are your thoughts about other markers like fasting glucose or fasting insulin? Or
Mhm.
do you rely primarily on hemoglobin A1C?
No, we look at the bigger picture. So fasting blood sugar or fasting hemoglobin, right? The morning sugars, as some people refer to it more informally, are really helpful. They're a guide because it lets you know, did your blood sugar reset overnight? Because look, here's the deal. After you eat dinner until you go to bed, then you go to bed, you go to sleep, and then you wake up the next morning, right? That entire period should be your fasting window. Fasting literally meaning you are not eating any food. You're not drinking anything either that could cause a rise in blood sugar or a rise in insulin, right? So at that point, you're going to be drinking water, maybe unflavored herbal tea, not a sweetened one, something with a bland flavor, right? We're not trying to invoke any kind of sweet response. So when you wake up the next morning, here's the deal. Sleep every day for all of us is an opportunity for your entire body, your mind, your spirit, your psyche, your gut, your everything to reset. Part of the reset that you should be able to enjoy and experience is getting to a healthy blood sugar range. So your fasting morning blood sugar numbers should be somewhere between 75 to 95. I love it when it's in the 80s, so that way I know it's not too low. It's not hypoglycemia, which most people would say is like 70 or lower for a fasting morning blood sugar number. And it's not too high either, like 105, 110, 120, or in the 200s, because it should have reset to under 100. And so if that's not happening, then that means your body, your blood sugar is at a higher level in terms of its average blood sugar exposure. Therefore, your A1C number is more likely to be higher. Not always, though. There are people who have higher morning sugars, but yet their A1C is okay. It's not in a prediabetes or type 2 diabetes range.
Have you also seen discrepancies sometimes where maybe hemoglobin A1C is on the higher side, but fasting insulin is on the lower side? Like, could that be like, is that, what do you say, false negative? Like one's a false negative test, or like it's just sometimes frustrating when they kind of oppose each other. One looks like the person has maybe not yet pre-diabetes, but heading in that direction. And then you look at another marker and it looks perfectly fine. Maybe not necessarily fasting glucose. I mean, even that too. But I guess as far as like focusing on fasting insulin and hemoglobin A1C, do you see sometimes one marker looks good, the other marker kind of on the higher side?
Yeah, they can be a paradox. Let's talk for a moment about fasting insulin, just to tie off what you had asked a little bit earlier. I do look at fasting insulin and gives us a clue. Love to see it in the single digits, 9 or under. If it's a 4 or 5, yay, because then we know that when the body's fasting, insulin's down. Therefore, it's not in mode of trying to store excess glucose somewhere, right? Because otherwise it's going to try and park that extra glucose, that extra blood sugar, as fat. This is telling you if the fasting insulin number is higher, like 20, 25, 30, that your insulin's working overtime. It is trying to find a way to deal with all of the glucose, the blood sugar. And if it's not signaling well with your cells, then the blood sugar that's available that should be grabbed up by insulin and taken inside the cell as energy is instead saying, hey, we got to put this energy somewhere, this extra glucose. It starts to park it as extra fat, often in the belly area, in the abdominal cavity, particularly around the visceral organs, the abdominal organs, or inside, in particular, the liver, one of the main organs there where the fat's likely to be parked. This is different than the kind of fat that is just under the skin, the subcutaneous fat. And that kind of fat gives off lots of inflammatory cytokines, those kinds of chemicals that can cause damage. It's not a good kind of inflammation. It's a damaging kind of inflammation. So if you see those together, fasting blood sugar is high and fasting insulin is high, that's a problem you need to address. You can see the paradox, though, that you just asked me about, of fasting insulin is higher, but A1C is okay. Or you could see a fasting insulin number in the single digits, it's 5 or 6, and A1C is still higher, right? So you're looking at windows in time. The A1C is an average, basically, of the last 3 to 4 months of your life in terms of your average blood sugar. So your bone marrow every day is putting out brand new red blood cells. And that's the good news. If they're coming into an environment of high blood sugar, then they're going to get sticky with that extra blood sugar. The process is this, if I could just take a moment to explain it, because I find that a lot of times people don't know what is an A1C and why do we care? So is it okay if we just take a peek at what that's about?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. All right, great. So a hemoglobin A1C, or just shortened to A1C, is a measure of the average amount of blood sugar exposure your red blood cells have had over time. Your body naturally every day promotes or creates and then puts out fresh new set of red blood cells for you. Now, what happens is inside that red blood cell, you guys might remember from science class in middle school or high school that there's a chemical called hemoglobin. That heme molecule sits in the center of the red blood cell, and it's sitting there, right? And its job is to exchange carbon dioxide for oxygen. So boop goes the carbon dioxide, leaves, boom, in comes the oxygen. When this is a healthy working mechanism, you're going to have energy and feel good. If for some reason the works here are literally gummed up, your energy systems are going to crash. You're not going to feel as good. You're more likely to feel fatigued. You might need to take a nap. You really can't get through the energy of your day. Here's why. When you have too much glucose, too much blood sugar, this exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide is getting compromised. And the extra blood sugar, those molecules, extra glucose, stick onto this hemoglobin molecule, the heme, and they gum it up. Therefore, this easy exchange now is more like this, where it's just too much to work. You can see that this is a much different process than this, right? Like, which one's going to be the better flow? This is where the blood sugar complications that happen create a process called glycation. And with that comes that damage that causes the heart attacks, the strokes, and all the other flow problems for your vasculature. Your blood literally can't flow as well as it should throughout your cardiovascular system. That's why diabetics tend to have problems that are related to literally gummed up blood with too much blood sugar. So they're at risk for diabetic retinopathy and losing their vision and going blind. They're at risk for having their kidneys be destroyed and wind up on dialysis. Kidneys hate extra blood sugar. They don't like it at all, and will cause you to pee a lot and do whatever needs to happen to try to change how much glucose concentration is in your blood. Your nervous system doesn't like it either. That's why people get peripheral neuropathy, fingers, toes, nose, things going on with their ears, problems with their mouth and dentition, their pelvic floor. Men wind up with erectile dysfunction, women wind up with clitoral dysfunction, inability to enjoy sex and reach orgasm, things like that. This is all a function of blood flow. And when it gets compromised, these are some of the symptoms that show up. Problems with the immune system, right? The immune system is also a part of this system, and people become much more vulnerable to infections and infectious processes. They'll have wounds that don't heal. If they've gone numb, they can't even feel that they were injured and they got wounded. It just becomes really bad. Things become abscessed. It's terrible. In terms of the lower body circulation, the legs and feet are really sensitive to this, and people wind up sometimes amputations and start to lose body parts. They lose the toes, they might lose their lower legs, they might lose the entire leg. I've known people who have had double leg amputations off of this. They got terrible advice and didn't follow and followed the terrible advice, and maybe they didn't know it was terrible advice on how to deal with their diabetes, or they ignored good advice. Both roads will lead you to the same destination of the terrible, awful consequences of diabetes. It leads nowhere good. You have to be proactive about it. The good news is that there's really 5 basic lifestyle steps that will make the biggest difference for turning it around where possible, or at least keeping any further damage from happening.
Are you okay with sharing at least some of those steps?
Yeah, sure. Let's go through it. So there's 5 steps which I've bundled up in the Yates protocol. And I always tell people, as much as it might seem that it's obvious, you still have to do things that are specific and relevant to you and your needs and how you live your life, right? So it's a proven program with customizable element, because we are all unique individuals. So the bullseye of the target, and I know you'll agree with me on this, is nutrition. You absolutely positively have to have a healthy nutrition that gives you good blood sugar, good glycemic control. We cannot ignore the importance of food in this. It's literally let your food be your medicine and let your medicine be your food. In that, you have to understand what foods you're eating that are having a healthy, good blood sugar response for you, and which ones are causing you to spike. Which ones put you on that blood sugar roller coaster, right? Where you're just slamming up and down, slamming up and down. Not good. And sometimes healthy foods can have unusual reactions. On a generic list, people would say things like cauliflower or quinoa or blueberries, any of the berries, would probably be okay for most people and be healthy, particularly in a normal portion. There are people who have unusual blood sugar reactions to seemingly healthy foods. And if you're one of them, this might be why you're struggling to get control of your blood sugar. So it's good to test and not guess. That's why I'm a fan of either the glucometer and test strip idea, or using a CGM, so you know what's going on. Like, how are you responding? Because you might find that healthy, that you think smoothie or other combo is not a good combo for you. Or maybe you are keeping yourself from eating, let's say, bananas, potatoes, sweet potatoes, yams, because you think that it will spike your blood sugar. You should test and be sure. It might be fine for you. If it wasn't okay for your neighbor, doesn't mean it's necessarily a problem for you. So that's one. The next would be meal timing. The time of day you eat your food matters for good blood sugar control. And in particular, for insulin resistance, it's the same advice. With this, I will give you 2 tips. One is to make sure that you allow at least 3 to 5 hours between your dinner time and when you put your head on your pillow to go to sleep. The reason I say that is this is part of the magic of getting your blood sugar to reset overnight. You got to give your gut a rest. So you don't want to have a big, heavy meal and then go to bed on it. This is a disaster for a number of reasons. More likely to lead to heartburn or gastroesophageal reflux disease, GERD, and most likely, it will lead to higher blood sugar numbers in the morning, not back in that healthy range. You just won't have time to reach there. The other tip I'll give you is this. I've noticed this for many people who have type 2 diabetes, not so much with prediabetes, but with type 2, which is often they get so busy in the middle of the day, they forget to eat lunch. That's a mistake for 2 reasons. Number one, our body expects input on a rhythm, and when we fail to meet that rhythm, things get out of whack, get out of order. Your whole hormonal system, including your thyroid system, is unhappy when you are inconsistent. The other thing is you get so hungry that by the time you hit dinner, whoo, you're ready to eat whatever, right? And that's where people often make mistakes, because they're hungry. They're going to eat, the fastest, simplest, easiest thing, because it solves the problem quickly. And in today's world, in an environment of 24/7 food, much of it is highly refined and ultra processed. This is not good. The next step, so we've
Agreed.
covered nutrition, meal timing. Step 3 would be the power of sleep. Sleeping is healing and healing is sleeping. We have to get rest, be able to restore, regenerate, and help those reset mechanisms. Some people have a phenomenon where their blood sugar rises around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, Smogy effect. That's an inappropriate response. It should rise a little bit to get you ready for your day so you don't pass out when you go from horizontal to vertical. But it shouldn't spike then when you're sound asleep. So if it does, you need to do something about that, and that will determine your activities during the day to get rid of that bump. The next piece around that for sleep is to know that it should be a friend And if you're struggling with sleep, if you get feedback from someone that you snore a lot, or even worse, that you don't breathe at all for times, you go completely silent when you're sleeping. Maybe it's a family member who tells you this, maybe it's a lover, however you do it. There's even apps that can help you. So if you live on your own or don't sleep with anyone else, you absolutely could still get the data. You should have a sleep study done because it's serious. It could be life threatening, right? You might have sleep apnea or some other disorder that needs to be, assessed. So again, test, don't guess. Test, don't guess. It's a rallying cry. Fourth step is stress. Stress is underappreciated, I think, in the general public on how many things it can break. I liken stress to the bully that grabs you by your genetic collar and slams you up against the wall of whatever's hanging out in your genes, your epigenetic expression. And this means then that some of us are going to be more vulnerable to problems with diabetes than others. Some people, that's not their weak link. Maybe it's asthma, maybe it's osteoporosis. It could be any number of things. And our fifth thing, of course, is going to be exercise and strength training. And here's the beautiful thing about exercise and strength training, and it's true for all of us at any age or stage, which is that exercise, right? Active working muscles are blood sugar sponges. So whenever you can exercise, take that opportunity and do it. It makes the difference. Those muscles open right up and they're like, yes, give us that glucose. And so you will see a rise. It is natural. Don't freak out. You will see a rise in your blood sugar while exercising because your body is mobilizing the energy sources to meet the demand of your active working muscles. This is a good thing. Active working muscles are a blood sugar sponge. So if you see a blood sugar spike, you can start to do wall squats and sits. You can go for a walk. There's a lot of things you can do to get that blood sugar down. When you exercise, you will see it up. It should reset in about an hour, half hour to an hour or so within that time frame, 30 to 60 minutes, normal occurrence, nothing to worry about.
So earlier you mentioned, as far as exercise, the most important of exercise is whatever someone's willing to do. But ideally, you would say it would be a combination then of like some resistance training along with cardiovascular exercise.
Yeah, I think that cardiovascular, as long as you're physically able, not in pain or otherwise compromised, ideally should probably be about 5 days a week if you really want to do something about insulin resistance and diabetes, because in this case, the regularity, that rhythm really makes a difference. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be for 2 hours a day. 30 minutes done daily to 40 minutes for most people will be fine. And as we get older, really, I think that, the 30-minute mark is super. You don't have to pound yourself. It's not like you have to prepare for a half marathon or a marathon every day. Everybody has to rest and reset. Professional athletes, absolutely. If you're paying attention to any of the sports leagues, you're absolutely seeing some of the athletes tap out sometimes, depending on the sport, and strategically rest because they have so much more information and data now so that they don't get worn out. And as a result, in some of these careers, whether it's, say, something like basketball or soccer, some of these more aerobically and anaerobically intensive sports, people have longer careers than they used to. These guys and gals, they are taking much better care of themselves than was historically the case because they've got better information. you know when it comes to exercise, the thing about strength training for people, especially as we get older, in particular for women, as we enter our 50s and 60s, from what I've understood of the research and other experts that I get to work with, it's best to train 3 times a week. And when you first start a weight training regimen, you're going to start off in a way where you're emphasizing great form. So you might start at lower weights for the first 2 to 3 weeks, emphasize form, work with a personal trainer so you know what you're doing, you don't injure yourself. That way you can keep going. And once you've got your form down, then you want to emphasize going heavy. So let's say you started out with 5-pound weights, then you want to graduate to 10, to 15, to 20, particularly for women. This is important both for bone health, so you can avoid osteoporosis. It's important for balance, so you don't wind up with the falls we hear sometimes that older people have that usually open up Pandora's box of problems. And you also want to be able to have that good blood sugar control and maintain it as you age. And so working with your musculature and your neuromuscular balance and those proprioceptors, your inner ear and all, that give you the balance, you really want to be able to do these things. So I think that piece of self-care, every day, if you commit to that 40 minutes or so, whether it is the aerobic side or it's the strength training side, whatever exercise you'll do is the best. It could be dancing, but just get it done. Make sure that's on your calendar. And I tell people, especially if they already have diabetes or insulin resistance, now your first and primary job in your rest of your life is going to be your self-care. Often these are very generous people. They're the rock of their community. They do so much for others. You got to do this for yourself. Self-care has to be job number one. That way, whatever else happens the rest of the day, you've already taken care of you.
Definitely agree with everything you said. So thank you so much for sharing that. And so diet. So we all know diet is important. I mean, not everybody follows a healthy diet or eats a healthy diet, even though they know. But when it comes to supplementation,
Mhm.
so like there's also a lot of supplements that potentially can help with blood sugar, or at least play a role. Again, they're not a substitute for diet, but what are your thoughts about some of the supplements out there like berberine, alpha lipoic acid, even like chromium and magnesium?
Yeah. So I'm a real fan of alpha lipoic acid. I think that its oxidative fighting powers are really great. It's a wonderful antioxidant. I personally use it and just to help protect your nervous system and all the other things that might be affected by free radical damage. Whether you live in an environment that has more environmental toxicity or just to combat the normal changes that go along with aging, et cetera, I think it's a great member of the toolbox. When it comes to chromium, that's one of the minerals that often is deficient in the diet, and so you could test for it to see how much chromium someone might need. That's helpful. Another consideration is berberine. Now, when I went to naturopathic medical school, we were always taught to be cautious about the use of berberine because we were concerned that it might be a little too antimicrobial and disturbing of the gut's microbiome. In today's world, it seems like I think there's already been so much damage to people's guts microbiome that berberine often is very helpful. And it might be a shorter term tool or it might be a longer term tool. I think it depends on the person's health history. Some people, as kids, were given antibiotics like back to back to back to back many times, let's say for ear infections, like it was candy or something. And it's just an odd thing. It depends on the kind of medical help people got when they were little. So if you know that's in your history, you probably need to do some other microbiome, replenishment strategies. Berberine can be very helpful for blood sugar management in and of itself, and it may not be necessarily an automatic problem for the gut's microbiome, right? Um, Things like fenugreek. Let's see. There's banaba. There's any number of other things. Gymnema. I'm a real fan of fenugreek and gymnema, especially if people have cravings. They find that they have such a sweet tooth it just ruins any ability to make good choices around the things they eat and drink. It can really help to reset that tongue and buy you some time. The good news is that the cells on the tongue turn over every 10 to 14 um, days. And so you get a whole fresh crop. So within the course of half a month to a full month, you can really change your palate if you want to. So if you're struggling with cravings, just know you can take charge of it and be able to say goodbye to them.
Yeah, getting back to berberine, there's definitely some controversy. I had on the podcast Dr. Jason Horlick. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He has a site probioticadvisor.com, just an expert when it comes to the gut microbiome. And he's opposed to berberine just
Mm.
because of like some older studies. But most of the newer studies seem supportive of berberine in the gut. And then I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Rhonda Patrick of Find My Fitness, and she does a lot of research, and she had an episode on her podcast on berberine, and that was one of the things she covered about the gut microbiome. And at least according to her research, it doesn't seem like it's negative, or at least short term. I mean, if someone's taking it for 6 months or a year, I guess you could say maybe unknown, but for taking it for a few months even, she didn't seem too concerned. So again, it's one of, like Dr. Horlick would say, probably not. I think specifically what he said, if someone takes probiotics with the berberine, that it would be okay to kind of replenish. But you could tell he wasn't a big fan of that. Whereas again, Dr. Rhonda Patrick seems like she said it was okay. And again, the research I've done, like if you just go into PubMed and you do search for berberine and gut microbiome, I mean, most, if not all, of the recent studies are all positive on the effects of berberine when it comes to the gut microbiome.
It is interesting to see that shift in research. Thank you for pointing that out. I think that people's own lived experiences and the environment that we're in right now, it's not only more complex, we've got more chemicals in the environment that we often are eating or being exposed to, maybe unwittingly, than has ever been true before in human history. I feel like we are all in the midst of a giant experiment whose outcome is unknown. We are the laboratory. And maybe that's why people have different points of view or different experiences with berberine. I haven't seen any catastrophes from it. It's been fine. But I also have had so many things in my toolbox as a naturopathic physician that I haven't had to rely on one thing in order for it to make that clinical difference, you know?
And what are your thoughts about metformin?
Metformin is a helpful medication and it buys people time. I always tell anyone who has diabetes, type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes, type 1, um, insulin resistance, is that you still have to do the lifestyle pieces. Obviously in the case of type 1 diabetes where someone's body no longer makes insulin and for the rest of their life they will need to take insulin as a medication. We don't have a cure for type 1 diabetes yet. I'm hopeful they'll figure that out, but we're not there yet, right? You still need to do all you can to not be on that blood sugar roller coaster. Those spikes up and the crashes down and lows can be devastating for a type 1, potentially deadly, right? Absolutely to be avoided. So you want to keep everybody, wherever they are in the blood sugar response spectrum, in that healthy zone as much as possible. So with that in mind, then paying attention to those lifestyle factors, nutrition, meal timing, stress, sleep, exercise, and strength training, there's really the way to go. Because then when you get and stay in that healthy range as much as possible throughout the day and night, now you're keeping yourself out of the danger zone for the nasty, unfortunate consequences of uncontrolled diabetes.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, there's a time and place for certain medications. So I just wanted to get your
Yeah, it
opinion.
serves a place. I'm not opposed to medication. I feel like it absolutely buys us time, and if that's the thing that's working, do it. You still got to do the lifestyle stuff though.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely agree with that. And so just circling back to the consequences of diabetes, do you see it? So you know that most, if not all, of the listeners have a thyroid or autoimmune thyroid condition.
Mhm.
Have you seen any relationship between blood sugar imbalances and,
Yes.
whether it's just thyroid imbalances or thyroid autoimmunity, Graves, Hashimoto's as either a trigger or a contributing factor?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked that. I was going to bring it up. So thank you. Great timing. Um, when I think of the thyroid, when I think of the whole hormonal system, the endocrine web, if you will, I do think of it as a spider web. And it's like if you pluck one little strand on the web, you'll see the whole thing kind of quiver. So when you look at the hormonal dance that goes on, I think of the thyroid as being the conductor of the symphony. And if the thyroid is not functioning well, if it's under autoimmune attack, if it's just hypo and low, kind of sluggish, or if it's hyper, a little too revved up, you really want to get that into balance because it'll drag other things with it. What I've classically seen has been if somebody's been really stressed, let's say now they have clear diagnosed thyroid problem, often the next thing that breaks if they haven't gotten the help they need is their adrenal system. Their cortisol regulation will go bonkers. And as a result, if cortisol now becomes out of balance because it is meant to be a life emergency system and not normal life system. And what I mean by that is adrenaline is there, cortisol are there as partners to let you respond to an actual emergency. Most emergencies, well, they used to be the case, were brief. They weren't sustained. In today's world, I don't know. Things are changing. So, you're supposed to be able to be superhuman with the use of cortisol and adrenaline rushing through your bloodstream for 10 minutes. This is how you hear about a petite woman who's maybe 90 pounds soaking wet, lifting the car off of a loved one, a superhero, a superwoman move in that moment that she ordinarily wouldn't be able to do. But she can because they're a clear threat, able to perform a miracle. And in that process, then, if it's a 10-minute moment, it's okay. Your body will eventually bring your cortisol and adrenaline back to a normal level and you'll be all right. But if you are under threat, real or perceived, if maybe you live in a place that's dangerous, maybe you have a terrible work environment, maybe your family relationships, your love life is just a harmful, difficult thing. Maybe you've gotten some other kinds of surprises, financial or otherwise, that are just pretty shocking to the system. What'll happen is cortisol and adrenaline will get so used to being elevated and high, anytime they go up, they also at the same time, your body releases, again, friends, remember, this is the response to the emergency, glucose. It's releasing tons and tons of blood sugar because it thinks you're lifting the car off the loved one or you need to run away from something, right? But you're not getting the exercise that goes with that activity. You aren't burning off the extra cortisol and the extra adrenaline. Therefore, it keeps circulating in your blood system and it has the opportunity basically to act like little jackhammers on your blood vessels, right? Putting little holes and pock marks, if you will, along the way in your vasculature, your blood vessels, particularly around the heart And you're then therefore more at risk for things like heart attack and stroke. This is where this comes from. That's why people who have combinations of problems that include diabetes are more likely to have cardiovascular problems and heart attacks. So you absolutely want to get your thyroid situation straightened out. If you have thyroid and adrenal problems, you need both of them straightened out, because if you don't, they will absolutely cause the insulin resistance that leads you straight to prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. It's like one link grabs another link, grabs another link, grabs another link, and you need to unlink them. The good news is working on one or two usually yields the result and lowers the threshold of risk for the others.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, I agree. It's just amazing the body, how everything is connected, and just those 5 factors that you mentioned earlier, just incorporating those. It's not just about blood sugar, but those could help with, I don't want to say everything, but a lot of things, if not everything. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, it's incredible, and that's to me so hopeful in healing. And no one situation is too complex. It's all figure outable. The path won't be linear, and get to know yourself better.
yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And again, you shared a lot of great knowledge, and we know you have, well, I know you have, and I want you to let everyone else know about an upcoming summit that you're going to be hosting. And then, of course, other places people could find out about you in case if someone wants to work with you. So yeah, talk about your summit that's coming up.
Oh, sure. Thank you. So I'm the host for the online Reversing Type 2 Diabetes Summit. It will be live and free October 3rd through the 9th of 2023. So you're welcome to check that out for those who are interested. My websites are Dr. Beverly Yates. So Dr, like the abbreviation for doctor, then Beverly, Beverly Yates.com. And you can also check out naturalhealthcare.com. naturalhealthcare.com. We are literally redoing that one right now as of our recording, and certainly by the time people come check out your show, it'll be up and wiggling, and be able to join us there. We'll have opt-ins for people who want more information about continuous glucose monitors, who want tasty, simple, delicious recipes for blood sugar management. And one of the fun things about that is that it includes both options that have meat or chicken, things like that in them, as well as plant-based 100% vegetarian and or vegan recipes. So wherever you're eating, whatever's working for you, because I know the nutrition is not one size fits all, I got you, so people are welcome to grab those.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing. I'll make sure to put the links in the show notes. And again, this was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Dr. Beverly, for talking about insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. So everybody, please make sure you're following Dr. Eric wherever he may be in social media so you get all the latest posts. He's been very focused on his mission for work with thyroid and autoimmune support. And I always really love when colleagues have a clear, focused mission. I think it's just great. So make sure you're following him wherever he might be on social media. And I'll make sure I send him the links for how to connect for his show notes. So, friends, let's all link arms together and work together to have this world be healthier.
Agreed. Well, thank you so much. And do you have a few minutes for questions?
Sure. Do we have any questions that came in?
We do actually. Let me share the questions, and we'll knock them out. So, first question: what are the fundamentals in our protocol that participants need to know to balance blood sugar?
Okay. So the fundamentals would be making sure that the foods that you eat are really kind and gentle to your blood sugar, testing and not guessing, so that you get that dialed in. That is essential. I have seen people eat foods that are otherwise healthy, like say cauliflower, have those unusual reactions, because normally that would be on your laundry list of, yeah, everybody should eat cauliflower. It's why I don't give a generic list of nutrition, because I've yet to find one that works for everyone, right? So that's one. Another fundamental is making sleep a priority. If you were a professional athlete or an Olympian or something like that, you would absolutely prioritize sleep. Those folks do. And it makes the difference. You have to have the opportunity to reset. I think sometimes we get so busy, there's so many demands on us, we need to learn that the word no is a complete sentence. You don't need to explain it, it's just a no, right? So that's a fundamental. Protect your sleep. And be thoughtful about what it is you watch, if you watch TV or anything like that, or listen to things. So you're not taking violence or anything that might be upsetting into your sleep world. Remember, that's where your spirit is reconnecting and refreshing too. So be thoughtful about that. Um, Other fundamentals would be stress. Identify what triggers a stress reaction in you. We are definitely not the same about what we feel stressed about. I know some people who are professional mediators and they enjoy conflict. It doesn't bother them at all. They lean into it. I know other people who maybe might be martial arts instructors and they feel fine about, let's say, physical conflict. I know other people for whom conflict of any kind is terrifying. We're different around what we feel is stressful. So understand what stresses you and do what you can to relieve it in a healthy way. Your blood sugar will thank you. When it comes to meal timing, make sure you have a plan for lunch. I see that's usually where the wheels come off the cart for most of us. It's lunchtime. Meal planning, I am a big fan of it. And if you ever do any of my work, you will absolutely have the opportunity to do the meal planning because that is essential. That way the meal mistakes don't happen, right? And then finally, exercise. Find the stuff that you love and then make that your focus. Do that. Your body will thank you, your spirit will thank you, your bones will thank you, your muscles will thank you, and your mental health will thank you. Exercise is such a great way to hit the reset button. It's kind of like sleep, but the active sense, right? It's another way to hit the reset button.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for reinforcing those again. And this question here, so there is a spiritual root to diabetes, unhealed and manifest into diabetes.
That's interesting. What I've seen, I'm just thinking, through 30 years of working with folks, it's been such an amazing journey. I think spiritual aspects will come into people being in a sacrificial lamb road where they are been so conditioned perhaps by their family or social expectations into being the one who's either the welcome mat or that everyone else relies on. But then that person doesn't have someone they can rely on. I think that can be a way in which diabetes will show up. That person gives and gives and gives and gives and doesn't have a way to get regenerative energy coming back into them. They've got all these outputs, no good inputs. One of the pieces of advice, I will share it here, that my mother gave me before she passed away, that I just so appreciate that she said this to me, and I've heard it from no one else, is make sure that as you get older, you make friends with people who are a variety of ages. So as you get older, especially welcome people into your life who are younger, because at some point, the people who are your age or older will start leaving. They will start passing on and into that spiritual plane. They're going to leave that physical body, right? They'll die, they'll pass away. And you need to still have that social connection and caring. So actively encourage relationships with people who have different circumstances and different ages than yourself. She was spot on. That was great advice. Thank you, Mom.
That is good advice. Yeah. Okay, we have a compliment here. Amazing health leader.
Oh,
Love her. So you have a big fan here. um, and then so have a 50-year-old Latino whom I took to a nephrologist because of glucose 139 and creatinine 50 with BUN 1.65. A1C is 6. His lipid panel is 226. Cholesterol 309, triglycerides, LDL 136 with alkaline phosphatase 119. Nephrologist gave no education or lifestyle advice. Okay, so how could you protocol help my patient? I'm a surgical Sherpa and wants to guide him to a solution that heals. I mean, again, I mean, it's the
wow.
fundamentals. I mean, I think you could get into but again, just,
We could have
really
a whole other episode
anybody.
on this situation, right? Yeah,
Yeah, and
so
obviously
first off,
some cases are more complex than others, so it's not to say that
absolutely,
this person might
absolutely,
not need to go beyond that, but definitely they need to at least incorporate the fundamentals, even if they have to do more. But yeah, what else do you have to
absolutely.
say, Doctor?
Yeah, so absolutely incorporate the fundamentals. And I'm sorry, I'm disappointed that a colleague, a nephrologist, gave no lifestyle advice or education. But I'm also not surprised because let's be real, medical doctors, when they go through the thousands of hours of training that they do not get advice on nutrition, stress, sleep, meal timing, exercise, resistance training, building community, having loving connections. That simply is not where their education is at. It's about being able to treat every ill with a pill or recommend surgery. They absolutely are great with diagnostic imaging, et cetera, and it has a place. There are times when we need that. I'm not here to bash it. I'm simply saying that their clinical training and focus is not on these lifestyle things. For myself with naturopathic medicine, Our clinical training and focus is on all the disease entities as well as the health promoters and human physiology, what's normal. And we're taught to build the bridge between the disease state to back to the healthy state. So we do focus on things like nutrition, herbs and botanical medicine, supplements where needed, medications where needed. We focus on the psychological aspects and person's spiritual beliefs. We focus on some of the less tangible stuff along with lab testing, right? So it's an integrative whole person approach. So here for this particular person, with his blood sugar coming in around 140 and his kidneys are clearly under threat at a 1.65 for a blood urea nitrogen, creatinine of 50, A1C of 6.0. So he's right there in the land of prediabetes. Lipid panel, I'm not worried about the fact that the cholesterol is 226. I'm much more concerned that he's got 309 for triglycerides and an LDL at 136. If he had a lot of good, healthy cholesterol, like let's say he had a lot of HDL, like often women as we age, one of the gifts we get is often our HDLs, high density lipoprotein, go up. That can often drive a cholesterol panel number up above 200. So the fact that it's over 200 isn't the issue, it's the details underneath. I just want to be really clear. So for him, I think whatever he can do that's about those 5 steps that I talked about and focusing in on his blood sugar might take some of the threat down for his kidneys if it's not too late. The kidneys are so different than the liver. The liver can do an amazing amount of regeneration. Your kidneys, once they're blown up, they typically don't come back. So you really want to get somebody out of trouble sooner rather than later. So that's why I tell people, if you have a blood sugar problem, then you need to know what to do about it so that you can be well and enjoy future health. If you don't take care of this now, you've really compromised your future and it will be awful.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Beverly, for that.
Sure.
All right. Heard. This is someone
Good.
heard what you said. And then I think this might be, we have some comments, but this might be, actually, I skipped over one, but from her website, Dr. Beverly Yates is on a mission to help 3 million people heal from type 2 diabetes and prediabetes. Latinos, our largest minority group in the U.S., would love to partner with her to adapt her protocol to serve this population. And this actually is related here. So I guess it's probably the same person. Is she open to us translating her Yates protocol to serve Spanish dominant Latinos and help them balance their blood sugar? So I'm not sure if you're looking into like different languages for your books.
Sure.
And
I'd be happy to. My grandfather immigrated to the U.S. from Cuba, and it turned out my husband's grandfather was also from Cuba. They're both from Guantanamo, and my mother didn't tell me that our family was from Cuba. We always thought that grandpa came from Jamaica, and he actually was born and raised in Cuba, and his family, when he was 5, moved to Jamaica, and then he immigrated to the U.S. from Jamaica. So we hadn't got the whole story. This was after my husband and I were married, and we found out we both have roots from Guantanamo, Cuba. We're like, I hope we're not related. It's too late. So yes, I'm happy to work with you. Please do reach out and connect. I'm also on Instagram. Literally the hashtag, or not the hashtag, the username is at Dr. Beverly Yates. So you can send an email to info@Dr. Beverly Yates. Please say that you were on Dr. Eric's podcast so I can recognize you, because I can't see who the Facebook user is. And let's connect from there. We'll be happy.
Wonderful. Patricia says, thank you both. Thanks, Patricia. Do you have time for one more question? One
Sure.
more pops in? Okay. So this will be the last question. How bad is fatty liver?
This is a great one. This is a great one to end on. Okay. So how bad is fatty liver for type 2 diabetes? It's a big deal. This means that your storage unit, so to speak, is overflowing. If you think about metabolism, what should happen ideally is that whatever energy items you consume during the day are burned up and used. Therefore, your metabolism's humming. There's no reason for your insulin to store extra glucose into your liver. Once you get a fatty liver, metabolically things are out of whack. You've gone into fat storage mode and you've left fat burning mode. So you need to find a way to flip the switch so that you go into fat burning mode and get out of fat storage mode. That is the job. That is the focus. That's the mission. Don't let anybody get you distracted about that. That's the job. Fatty liver left unattended to just gets worse. It also means that the body is putting out a lot of inflammatory cytokines and other chemical messengers. Just like when I explained adrenaline and cortisol earlier, like being little jackhammers that go throughout your blood vessels, and create these little pock marks and dents and dings that extra fat in the blood can now park into and create the heart attacks and strokes. Fatty liver is that process on steroids. You don't want it. You want to reverse that. It is reversible. That's the good news. The liver is amazing. Its ability to come back to life, to regenerate. It really is. The kidneys don't share that property.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for answering that question and for all the questions. Appreciate your time and sharing your knowledge, Dr. Beverly.
You're welcome, Dr. Eric. I appreciate your goodwill. Folks, make sure you stay tuned to what he's doing. Follow him on his social channels, and just keep spreading the love. Share these links because it makes a difference. We watch so many people struggle and suffer in today's world. Let's share quality information. We sometimes share ridiculous stuff. Let's share some good stuff.
Wonderful. We had another amazing presentation. Both are gems to all of us. And also, just to let those again on here on Facebook know, I'm pretty sure it's still a little bit of time for the link to the summit. Like the registration's not open yet for the summit, so
Yeah, it's not yet.
yeah. So yeah, definitely that's another reason to keep keep following me. Follow Dr. Beverly. We'll make sure that you get access again. Yeah. So again, thank you, Dr. Beverly, and thanks everyone for tuning in and for your questions. Hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your Friday and a wonderful week ahead.